Just to kick us off, Ethan, could you just tell us a little bit about your life growing up and your background and whatever you feel comfortable sharing about your experiences, really?
Yep. So, firstly, good morning.
Good
8
morning.
a.m. for a podcast is savage. So thank you for that.
You're looking well on it. You're looking well on it, by the way.
I know it's all a facade.
You look perky. I noticed you had a very large mug. I don't know what you've got. What potion
Can you
you've got
guess?
in there? Yeah,
Coffee. Coffee.
I thought
I've had two already. So, yes. Start the day properly. I'll go for a nap after this. My experience, my care experience. Obviously, I'm a care leaver. I spent my whole life in foster care, and it's multi-generational for me. You know, it's one of those families that's entrenched in the care system, going back multiple generations. So I'm third generation boy that went into the children's home.
Wow.
My father was in the children's home, addiction problems, violent perpetrator, criminal. His dad was the same, went in the children's homes in the 50s when he come over from Canada, and it's very much been passed on to us, the next generation. So some of my experience, you know, and whenever I do anything like this, I try and focus on the good and not the bad. Because we get into like finger pointing, and it keeps us on separate sides. And it's like lived experience, care experienced children and foster carers, social workers, social services as a whole. We're not on opposite sides. And it can very much be like that. You know, we can look at each other as the enemy, and I don't feel that way anymore. But as a child, that was how I felt. That's what was encouraged in me, not to trust, not to talk, you know, and that's all I can remember. It was tough as a child, you know, it was tough. I can't just paint it all as beautiful and like the positives. It was really hard. What I remember, you know, and we talk about trauma, and we're going to talk a bit about trauma. You know, there's the non-verbal stuff that I can't remember, but my earliest memories are of my sister screaming, my mum screaming, and violence in the house. You know, and I just always remember as a child, even when I was removed, always feeling really scared, really confused, really full of doubt, and always really isolated. You know, I was born into a world that I didn't understand, and I never felt safe. You know, and then I was removed into foster care. They tried to retransition us. That didn't work. So very quickly I went back to foster care, and then I spent my whole life in foster care, and there was some really tough times of that experience. You know, the children's homes, you know, as an 11-year-old was really difficult. And then as I sort of come out of care, it was all the baggage, the emotional baggage that I didn't know how to explain to you. How do you treat trauma that I don't even know? You know, and I become a man. I had a man's body, and I was still that broken, scared little boy, and it was really tough. But along the way was some really beautiful people that made a big impact on me, that showed me care and kindness and love and believed in me. They saw the boy and not the behaviour. And I think because of that, and because of those people in different services, I've managed to break free from that generational stuff.
And just going back a step, Ethan, how old were you when you were placed into foster care? And then it sounds like you moved to different foster homes or then into a residential home. So how old were you when you first came into care, and how did you feel at the time? And then what was it like moving around different places?
So the first time I went in, I think I was between 2.5 and 3.
Wow, very young then.
Yeah. So, and I've requested my records. So I'm currently waiting for my records. It's something that I've recently done, but I haven't received them yet. So the actual date I can just remember being, because I can remember snippets of being in the family home. And then when I was about 4.5, I was then, they tried to retransition me and my sister that I was removed with back into my mum's care.
Right.
My mum had been housed in East Sussex by a domestic violence charity organisation. She had been given a house. The older siblings had been relocated. They tried to integrate us, but part of the condition was my father wasn't to be there, and he was living in the loft the whole time on the run from the jail. Yeah, he was in the loft. So he would come down at night time And then we were obviously conditioned to don't say anything. If you say anything, you'll be removed again. But obviously the behaviour carried on, so he was come down at night, and then there was all the violence and then the consequences of that. And then we would go to school and all have to lie. And the second time we were removed, about 6 months in, I believe it was because my brother said something at school. And then, one day I was just called into the principal's office, and me and my sister were physically removed from that school. And obviously, all through my childhood, that was really tough to deal with, because theoretically, you've been physically kidnapped. And I was really angry for a long time about that, really angry. But now I get to look back in hindsight, and actually, it's like trauma with a big T or trauma with a small t. If I was to be left in that house, what would have happened to me?
Yeah.
And it was the rock and the hard place, and it was a really difficult experience for me. Now I feel really grateful, and I look at it, how must that have been for the social workers and the teachers at school to make that decision?
Yeah.
But we got removed and put into foster care, and that was the longest stable foster care me and my sister were with. So we were there about 5.5 years. But obviously my behaviour, was off the charts at that point, off the charts.
It's a really important point, that experience that you had of being removed, which in theory was for your safety and protection, and yet at the same time you experienced it as being kidnapped and being taken away from. So your subjective psychological experience as a child was you're being ripped away and taken away from the very people that love and care for you, albeit they have their problems. And it sounds like you weren't properly supported to fully understand. Did it feel like it just came out of nowhere from your experience as a young child, the removal, or was there any lead up or build up?
No, so because I'd already been in foster care, I sort of understood, and when we arrived at the foster placement that they took us to, we had had respite in the previous cycle of care that we had been in. We'd actually been at respite there.
Yeah.
So we was comfortable at the house. We knew them. They knew us. I reconnected with them a couple of years ago, and she said it was so sad seeing us. I arrived in a pair of shorts, a school t-shirt and a book bag. And she was like, you were so small and so scared. And she still has our photo, terrible photo it is, from the 90s on the wall.
Did she really?
Yeah, she's still got it there. She was like, yeah, you taught us the most. Yeah. 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 I thought she's being polite, but okay. But, with the trauma and whether that was normal or felt normal, to me, I didn't know that your dad beating your mum was wrong. I didn't know that drug paraphernalia around the house was wrong. I didn't know feeling scared all the time was wrong, because it was my normal. I didn't know that it wasn't wrong. Like the bits of foster care before that, I can remember, like the last placement, which was really tough for me and Lauren, but the others are just snippets, sounds or memories or smells that come through. It was very much entrenched in me that I didn't know that stuff wasn't normal. So it wasn't that I was at home and I was like, oh, this is terrible, everyone else's life's normal. I just thought that was normal, that had been normalised to me. So I didn't really look at it like trauma. It wasn't till I was older that I started to realise that that's not how normal families behave. You shouldn't be going to your sister's bed because you're scared every night. Those things aren't acceptable. And then obviously, mum, it was hard for her, but then she would take it out on us. And it's really, really pitiful. And it sounds like I'm being harsh on my mum and dad, and it's definitely not that. I now look at them with a lot of pity, both broken, traumatized children themselves that had never been cared or loved, that had never had secure foundations. And then they're having children that they're not capable of loving. They're not capable of having a stable relationship. So they attack each other, and we're the collateral damage. I have a great deal of pity for them through that experience.
And then you mentioned that you were in care for 5.5 years.
Yeah.
And then did that kind of break down for you and your sister, or was it specifically for you? And what was your journey there on afterwards?
So the way the split happened at the time, there was 4 children. The 2 oldest weren't my father's, so they went to my mum's mum, lived with her. There's kinship care, and then me and Lauren were kept together because we were both my dad's children.
Mm.
There was 2 younger ones later on, but both of them were adopted, and they've gone off to do amazing people. I managed to find them a couple of years ago. Really, really beautiful. My sister's just had a baby. Yeah, they got the family that they needed. The 2 older ones, you know, the oldest, Holly, died of a drug overdose when I was 17, you know, and it was really tough for her. She was the protector, the shelterer of the little ones, you know, and the burden that fell on her is terrible. And then obviously my brother, I don't see him, he's dealing with stuff in his own way, and I respect that, and I leave the door open if ever he wants to. But me and Lauren were kept together from that point until I was 11, and then I was separated because my behaviour was so challenging. You know, you've got to think at that point, all I knew was violence, all I knew was anger, all I knew was pain, and that manifested in me. And like I've shared with you before, like, I am neurodiverse. I was diagnosed with ADHD at the time, and it was really tough. It was really tough. The fact that I stayed at that placement for 5.5 years is testament to the love they had for looked after children. You know, they really, really put it in for me, you know, constantly at the school, trying to fight for my place. We laughed when I saw her. It was either me in the headmaster's office or it was her in the headmaster's office. That was his daily routine, and I'm sure he went bald in the first 3 years I was there. It was either me being told off, you got to leave the school, and her going in there and going, Ethan's not leaving the school. She was very much my challenger, but also my champion, you know, because of the love and care. You know, I've got the lessons I did. It was a really tough time though, really tough time. You know, you got all the trappings of not being nurtured and cared for. You know, not being able to use the toilet properly, not knowing how to wash yourself, not knowing how to eat. You know, like there was all these ramifications that a normal child at those points should just do. I was more likely to attack you than cuddle you. And that was really hard. And in the 90s, people didn't have as much awareness around this sort of stuff. It was just, you're a bad child, or you're an animal, or you're violent, or, you know, all the reinforcing of the fear that was already manifesting in me as a child.
How did 11-year-old Ethan make sense of the people that he'd lived with for 5.5 years, essentially saying that they could no longer look after him? How did your 11-year-old self process that?
Angry. I was just really angry, really angry. Obviously now I can look back in hindsight and see that, you know, I was the cause of it. And the fact that it lasted as long as it did was, you know, like I said, a testament to them. I was just angry and confused and wanted to blame them. And obviously there was a bit of culture shock. I went from that foster placement, you know, theoretically we'd been a family for like best part of 6 years. I'd been with my sister. She was all I'd ever had. She was like my anchor point. And then we were separated, and I went to a children's home, and I was 11 years old, and there was a lot of older kids there, and, you know, they were tough. They were tough. And very quickly there, I realised my life had changed. And then I resented them for it. But I wasn't capable of seeing my part. I wasn't capable of seeing my part in it. You know, and I'm just now really grateful for them. Really grateful.
It's hard, isn't it? Because on the one hand, your behaviours were directly, as you described, a manifestation of your experiences. It was a consequence of what you've been through. And yet you're here talking about taking some responsibility for those behaviours that you displayed as a 8, 9, 10, 11-year-old boy.
Yeah. Yeah. Because if those behaviours wasn't there, the placement would have continued. I can't take responsibility in the sense I didn't choose them. Life's a lottery, right? No one chooses where they were born. Why were both my parents heroin addicts and violent criminals? I don't know. This was the life I was given, and I'm just trying to make the best of it. But I know that my behaviour, whether it was intentional or unintentional, whether it was traumatized, whether, you know, fundamentally because of that is why the placement broke down. You know, it could have broken down year one. You know, it was terrible to behold my behaviour. I look back on it now and it's like the anger and the violence and the fear that would burst out of me. You know, grown adults couldn't on me. And I was a 5-year-old boy. I had so much rage and anger. Although maybe I'm not responsible for that behaviour, it still was me. You know, so I couldn't have had this conversation with you, but it's like cause and effect, isn't it? Maybe it wasn't my fault, but it was my fault, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. It makes complete sense.
Fascinated by, sorry, Rich, you go.
So then how did it kind of unfold for you during your adolescence?
Yeah, the good years.
The good years.
Yeah, tough, really tough. You know, it's tough for normal kids, isn't it, as teenagers with the hormones and the changes, and then all of a sudden you're in a reasonably large children's home with older kids, you know, and things were really tough there, whether that's physical violence, whether that's intimidation, sexual abuse. You know, my life changed very quickly, and you're not part of a family, you're almost part of a pact, because yes, there's staff members there, but staff change 3 times a day. You have a choice in the kids' home I was in. You either stay the victim or you become the victimizer. Now, I didn't want to be either of those, but I'll tell you one thing, it was better to be the victimizer than the victim. And that was it. You come in, you're small, you're very young, you're taken advantage of, you're bullied, and then you grow. And then you have a choice, don't you? You either fit in and go with the pact. And, you know, and we're talking about groups of children that are extremely damaged. The normal, like I said, the normal to me was violence, was abuse, was anger, was fear, was thievery, with, you know, and it's like, and then they're all penned together and you have a choice, and it's a terrible choice for a child to make. Either run with it. Go on, Tim.
Sorry, Ethan, I cut you there, but
that's all right.
So Lauren, your sister wasn't with you this time.
No.
Take it. And how many kids were there in the children's home that you were in?
8, and they range from, I think, 17. I think 18 was meant to be the cut-off, but I think we had a few 17-year-olds while I was there, and 11. And they were of different ranges, different sex. It was really tough, really tough. It's that very much a British thing that when people hear that you've been in a children's home, they go, "Oh, is it like Tracy Beaker?" Like, no, mate, it wasn't like Tracy Beaker. Do you remember that on the BBC?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, and I was like, actually, no, it wasn't. You know, it was very much, I just remember in there, especially at night, feeling terribly lonely, just terribly alone, terribly unwanted, loved, and just, like I've said, really, really confused about why I'd been born, what was the point of life, you know, and why had this happened to me? You know, isolation, brutal isolation, with no safe place to talk, no one safe. You know, there were people in there that made an impact, but it's not the same. You know, me and Tim spoke yesterday and I said, growing up in care, how I describe that to people is like growing with no gravity. I was just in the darkness, alone, broken and lost, and there was no one to pull me down. You know, I've got a 15-year-old daughter. She goes off and explores the world. I pull her home when she needs love. I put her into me, and she's got that safety. So she can go off, she can make mistakes, she can fall down. But I'm there to pull her home, to pick her up, to dust her down, to love her, and to send her back out. Now, I was just in the darkness, and I just remember how lonely I felt. Really pitiful to think back. I think back on me and I just feel really sad for him. As you can feel sad for yourself in that way.
It's a beautiful phrase, that. Growing without gravity.
Yeah.
It will be the title of the book if I ever get round to it. But it just goes on the ADHD pile of things throwing dust over there. Yeah.
The many tabs that you've got open on your brain simultaneously.
I'm on about 800 on my iPhone. I'm into the private section. Seriously, it's terrible. It's terrible.
And then how did those behaviours manifest as you kind of were into the later stages of adolescence and a kind of early adulthood?
So drug taking was a massive thing for me. I like Gabor Mate. I like a lot of his stuff, and he talks a lot on trauma and addiction, and he talks about traumatized children, and taking drugs makes them feel like they're loved. It releases the same chemical responses. And at the age of 12, I started taking drugs recreationally, Class A. That was ecstasy, cannabis, alcohol, and that was my coping mechanism, because when I took a substance, even at that age, this turned down. I wasn't constantly on edge. I wasn't constantly in fear. I wasn't constantly in a state of fight and flight. It just mellowed me. And my father...
Emotions to your head there, Ethan.
Yeah.
Your brain is saying this, yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I forgot it's going to be audio and not...
Oh, so I was just intrigued
Very
about
good.
that. No.
We need subtitles.
No, it was... I was just intrigued by that, whether you could develop that a bit more, what's happening in your head. Yeah.
It became very quickly my comfort blanket, my soother, my pacifier, whatever you want to call it. I wasn't full of fear when I was taking drugs, and that's really sad. It just settled me. So very quickly, as soon as I started, that was it. I was off. And I know there's good links between neurodiversity and drug abuse, and it seems to be a pattern in families. There's, great stuff being explored around that. And it'd be fascinating to see, because I'm told neurodiversity is a disability, right? And I have no control over it. And yet lots of people that become entrenched drug addicts seem to have it. So it'd be interesting to see how that's explored and treated over the next 20 years. But when I was 12, my father come out of jail. It was a period where he was out of jail, and I would run away to see him. And this is the thing, we give the love we understand, and my dad had a horrific childhood, made mine look like a picnic. And the way he had dealt with his trauma was to self-medicate. So all he knew was drug taking. That's how he dealt with his trauma. That's how he dealt with his uncomfortability. So inevitably, when I run back to him, no work had been done with my father. We had been removed and he'd been left in the wild. So when I went back to him, what love did he have to give me? What love did he have to show me? And that was drug taking to deal with your issues and your problems. And by the time I was 14, I was smoking heroin and crack cocaine with him.
Wow.
And yeah. And I was angry in my late teens about that, and my early 20s. But actually, what other tools did he have? He was not equipped to give me anything than what he gave me. His solution to his childhood trauma was drug use, and he gave me that. Did he give me it to mess me up or to ruin my life? No, he gave me it because that's all he knew. He didn't have any other tools to give me. And it very much progressed like that. That's how my teenage years progressed. And I'd say the last sort of 6 months, a year of foster care was really difficult for me. Getting placements, being in placements was really hard. Getting them to stick or people to have me was really difficult because I was uncontrollable at that point. I was 16 years old and you couldn't control me. Like, I couldn't be cowed. I couldn't be told. I couldn't be disciplined. I was very much, like independent already. Being in foster placements was really hard for the foster carers because they had house rules and I would ignore them. And when they'd pull me on them, I'd say I'm not doing them. And it's as simple as that. What you're going to do, lock me in? You can't lock me in, I'll climb out the window. Like, this is how it's going to go. I was my own authority, and because I'd been so powerless as a child and so lack of control, lack of decisions, I was picked up, I was put there, I was told what was happening. I had no control, zero control. So the second I'm strong enough, you're not going to control me. And I would reject it and rebuke it quite fiercely. So it was really tough, that last bit. And and again, it's this thing, do I share negative stuff? But I think it's important. The last day I was in my leaving care place, they dumped me in Somerset with a black bag of wet clothes and told me to F off. That was my last day in foster care, yeah. And that was the days before smartphones. So I was given a train ticket and told to F off. Yeah.
Whoa. By the foster carers, Ethan.
Yeah, by the foster dad, yeah. Yeah. And it was only because there was nice people along the way that I had to ask. And I managed to get back to London and get back to East Sussex. Yeah. Yeah. It's really sad.
Yeah.
It's really sad. I've got a 15-year-old daughter, and when I look at her, I see a baby.
Mm.
And by that point,
Yeah.
I've been smoking heroin and crack cocaine for over a year. You know, and I was just, really pitiful. It's really pitiful more than
It's
anything.
pitiful, isn't it? And it's, I mean, when I'm just echoing your word rather than commenting myself using that phrase, but with the, you mentioned the growing without gravity, it feels like, were there some good elements of that independence and that feeling of more control and freedom that you're describing? You've described the impact and the difficulty of integrating with foster carers, etc. But were there some other, were there some positives in that as well at the time?
As in positive for me being independent, or
Yeah, and
positive
just that,
input through my journey?
yeah, that growing. I'm a bit stuck on that gravity phrase, and I feel you like flying, flying out of control, not to put my own spin on
Yeah,
it, but
drifting
also
into
it's
darkness.
yeah, and maybe this is me. I feel a bit exhilarated, but this is me being voyeuristic maybe about your story. And it's one of the things that we talked about yesterday, and me and Rich have talked about. It's about, as people that are listening or trying to learn from others, it's like there's elements where I haven't smoked crack cocaine, you know what I mean? And it's, yeah, is there it feels also like it's like we all have when we're growing up in adolescence. We are pushing boundaries in different ways, aren't we? And there is that feeling of freedom as well. And was that manifesting at the time? And was there anything positive about that for you as an individual?
Yeah, I think it's like you say, it's natural for teenagers to rebel and want to be independent anyway. So it's like a natural stage I was going through, but there was no foundation. So like when I fell, no one caught me. But I was, 16 years old, 15 years old, 14 years old, and thinking I knew about the world because I'd had no childhood, theoretically. Like, I thought I was grown. I thought I knew what was best. I thought I didn't need it. And actually, it hadn't even really manifested. I was just sweeping it away, pretending I was all right, pretending I was a geezer. I don't need anyone. I don't need no help. It's me. And actually what it was is I didn't have the ability to say, I'm desperate for help. I'm so afraid. Please, can someone love me? Because I couldn't allow that vulnerability, that weakness. No one had been there to comfort that, so at the time I may have thought, oh, I'm the boy, look at me getting tattoos at 15, like running about with like my dad and his older mates and, thinking I was the nuts. And actually it hadn't even started. It was just like a little lull before it got worse again. I was, very naive, but that's, the foolishness of youth, isn't it? I was desperate to get away and I thought that was the way to do it.
And then can you speak to your journey into recovery and how that came about for you?
Yeah. So again, that's a long one. Yeah, I obviously had my daughter when I was 19. So I ended up down in Folkestone, which is Kent area. I was there for a while, and that was because part of my mum's release from jail when I was a teenager was her condition from Holloway was that she would go to a rehab, and that's where she ended up. Obviously, at 16, after that leaving care placement broke down, I was living in a crack squat where my sister was, and one of my social workers, and I speak about her on the training courses that I do. One of my social workers, she was the only one that really reached me. As soon as she found out, she turned up, and I could close my eyes now, and I could see this little lady sitting in a crack den on the edge of the sofa. That she knew I was there, and yet she turned up, and she was deeply uncomfortable there. But she turned up for me, and she was like, right, called my mum and said, can Ethan stay for a few days? And inevitably my mum didn't want me, you know, so I ended up down there. But it's like, this is a hard thing around, and you go into foster care and then you try and integrate back, but you're like a cuckoo that's been removed from the nest. You know, my mum rejected me over and over and over again. She didn't want me and made that clear and was quite clear about that. So I ended up staying in Folkestone, having a child young, and I thought, this is going to be it. This is what's going to fix me. Family, love, connection. And I had no skills to keep any of that going, and it fell apart. And what did I do, as I always did? Drink and drugs to use. And that was very much my tease, was trying to be a father, because I was adamant. So even though I was using and working, I still turned up for her. Even if I was in really bad shape, she always came on a weekend she was meant to. I always picked her up from school. I always showed up for her, even if it was physically and I was battered or in a bad shape. I always turned up for her because no one had turned up for me. I always told her I loved her because no one had told me they loved me. I always told her I was proud of her because no one had told me that. Throughout it, that consistency of trying to give her what I didn't have, while at the same time destroying myself through that self-hate and loathing and worthlessness. I would drink and use to absolute oblivion. If I wasn't with her, I was pickled. I was determined that she wouldn't feel unloved and unwanted. You know, she deserved a lot better, but could have had a lot worse. That was very much my 20s. That was how it went. That was, you know, not knowing what trauma was, not knowing what my experiences meant. You know, 5 years ago, I wouldn't have had this conversation. People didn't know my experience. People didn't know my life. You know, when we've talked, Tim, I think about a home, and home to people, that's normal. It's like breathing. Oh yeah, my home. It's where your dad is or where your family is. I never had a home. That word to me is alien. And I was just out in the wilderness. You know, it's that thing, isn't it? So much is put in place to remove children, right? So much is put in place to love and to care for them. But what happens when I don't need protecting and I'm a man, but I'm still that boy? So I just covered it. And inevitably, it all come on top. You know, what really led to my final downfall, because I was very good at spinning plates. I'd got good at spinning plates. I just about kept my life going. Just about kept it going at all times. I was running around spinning. And then COVID happened. Am I allowed to say that word? Will you get censored for saying the C word?
That's all right. You said you would avoid using the C word yesterday, and I thought you meant a different word. If you want,
yeah. And now the intrusive thoughts have started. I want to bring up different conversations around that.
Yeah. So sorry, I got your check there. As you do say what that crescendo in COVID was, but for the people listening, they'll hear these insights that you have if it's trauma with a capital T and a small t, your experience in foster care, what you've just said there, so there's this sense all the while when you're talking that these deep insights were going to drop later, these insights that you have now into your own experiences and your sense of yourself and your own story. But that moment when you decided that you were showing up for your daughter and you were going to tell her you loved her and you were proud of her, and that you're suggesting that you weren't fully there as far as understanding yourself, and you hadn't been through your recovery journey yet, but there was some instinct that you were going to break a chain and do something different and behave differently than your parents. And I wondered what led you to that, or what enabled you to just be different on instinct. Do you have it might be hard. It's very long, probably a hard question to answer.
It's a really interesting question, and it's something I ask myself a lot, because a lot of the kids I was in the homes with and stuff, you know, their outcome hasn't been like mine. You know, my sister, for example, 4 of her children were removed, you know, and adopted. My oldest sister, before she died, she had a child, and that child was looked after by my mum's mum as well in kinship care, and my daughter didn't end up. And I think it's probably because I was good at hiding. good at hiding in plain sight that, actually if my behaviours had been known or seen, there would have been a good justification to remove her or to remove me from her life.
Yeah.
I just always had a sense that I know how it all made me feel, and I just didn't want her to feel the same. Maybe she would have a druggy dad, an addict dad, but I didn't want her to feel unloved or unwanted, or I just knew how painful that felt. And it's funny, isn't it? When I had her, I wanted a boy, obviously, but having a little girl, she's been my greatest teacher. That anger, she softened slightly. That pain, she lessened. And it's this funny thing when I reflect on it, my pain and suffering and the experience that I've got now that I paid a terrible price for became my daughter's shelter, became her safe place, became her lessons that she got for nothing. And that's a great privilege for me. And I would live all of it over and over and over again, as many times as I had to offer her that shelter, and I just have hopes that she'll go on to continue this journey. And I don't know why I ask myself that question, why me? Why me out of all of them? Why me out of all of my family? And I don't know if there's an answer. I don't know. Characteristics, certain love that I was given, certain encouragement, certain people along the way. There's definitely people along the way that now I see had an impact.
Mm.
But yeah, it was tough.
And thank you, Ethan. When you mentioned a moment in COVID, what was happening then, and was that the time when you started on the recovery trail?
I knew from a very early age that I had an issue around drugs. I knew that. My mum had obviously been to rehab when I was like 16. Everyone in my family is either a drug addict or an alcoholic. Generations of it. Like, no one gets sober, no one gets well. And my mum had been sober for a few years before my sister's death. My mum had a little bit of time in sobriety, and she'd done that through a rehab and some 12-step fellowship stuff. So I knew that people could stop using, but I didn't know it was consistent. And I tried and tried and tried to stop. I didn't realise the problem was me, was my thought patterns, was my behaviour, was my resentment, rather than the drugs being the problem. I thought if you just got rid of the drugs and the drink, everything would be perfect. No, you sweep away what I'm using as a solution, it doesn't get better, it gets worse. And I desperately tried, and I couldn't work that out in my head. I couldn't work out why when I stopped drinking and using, it got worse, not better. I thought, this is mad. So inevitably, I always went back to it. And during COVID, it's that funny thing. Everything stopped during COVID. Well, the drug dealers didn't stop. They didn't stop. You could, nowadays, without being crass, I could get drugs dropped quicker than a pizza. And that's the real talk about it. They're so readily available. And we're talking about, we got like lists of drugs. You don't just go to this one geezer and get a bit of weed, or you go over here and you know this person or your friend knows. No, you'll get a list from a gang or a group. You can have everything you want and it can be dropped at your door in 10 minutes. And then all of a sudden I'm sat in my flat. I'm homeschooling my daughter 3 days a week. And then I'm sat in my flat and I just drunk and use. And I couldn't work. I was a carpenter at the time. I couldn't work. All the sites had closed down. And I was just trapped in my own head. And what really brought it down is COVID was, COVID sort of, the restrictions loosened a bit and everyone was sort of going back to work. And then just before March, they were going to be completely relaxed. And my best friend, so he took his own life. So he had been obviously very isolated during COVID, and he took his own life, and he was an addict like me. And to say he was my best friend would be an understatement. He was my family. Me and him were like brothers, like I'll never have a friendship like that. I'll never have a connection like that. I know that. He understood me and I understood him, and his dad had died when he was young, and we just found each other at a point in our lives. And yeah, I'd found it really difficult to trust or let people in. I was very isolated as an adult, out of choice, and he just had a way of understanding me. And he took his own life as COVID was ending, and it was a terrible thing, and I just couldn't understand it. The nicest human being, one of them that I'd ever met, thought that his life was so bad and life was so terrible that he decided to take his own life, and he had a young baby. And it's this funny thing, right, about physical pain. Physical pain can be covered up, you know, with drugs and drink and with medication, and you can cover it. But emotional pain like that was so deep. I just couldn't cover it up. No matter what I did, I couldn't cover it up, and it had blown me to pieces. And I'd always, throughout my life, I was always very good, no matter how painful it got, no matter how traumatized I got, no matter how difficult. I was always really good at like collecting the broken pieces of me and holding them back together. And his death just absolutely blew that to pieces, and I just couldn't seem to find the strength to pull myself back together. And I ended up losing everything. My flat, you know, I wasn't really seeing my daughter. I went down to about 10 stone. I was combining drugs at a ruthless rate. How I didn't die, I don't know. And I ended up losing it all. And like in that ruin, I ended up staying with my nan, which was, you know, it was bad when my nan lets me stay because she's not forthcoming. And I was on her sofa and inevitably broke apart. And I ended up sleeping rough in a graveyard in East Sussex. And that was the first week I got clean, properly clean. I was sleeping in a graveyard in a tent I'd made out of a tarpaulin. And I'll tell you what, I've never been more free in my life. You know, I had no bank account, no mobile phone. Everything in society that we're told to value and need and want, all those things that I looked at other people and found jealousy and resentment around, like family, love, support, safety, money, status, ego, reputation, was stripped away from me. And I was a raw and open human being. And my journey obviously has God in it, which is part of the 12-step programs, you know, and I prayed one of those days and I was answered by something I can't quite explain to you. And my life, I haven't used drugs since, and it will be 4 years in April. And I was desperate, and I thought I was Bear Grylls. Living in the graveyard. I did.
It was new. The phrase came into my head that you told me yesterday. New ground.
Yeah, which is churches.
Yeah.
The old me went there to die, and I was sort of reborn, and I find it really poetic that I ended up sleeping in the graveyard. And I'd have told you at the time it was because other people were scared to go in there at night. It was quiet and peaceful. That would have been my reasons. But now I get to look back and I think the old me went there to die, and I was reborn, and I've gone on this journey, and I attended fellowship meetings. I was taught that the problem wasn't the drink and the drugs. It was all this fear and pain I was carrying, and I had to go through all of it with another man, and that was really painful. Being free of this was really hard to do, you know, but it can be done. And that was how I got into recovery, and I just kept showing up, kept turning up, remained teachable, and I hated it.
You remained teachable,
and I hated it.
Those of you that are listening, and you can see this. We're going to put this up on the Relational Activism YouTube channel, actually. But you'll get a sense of Ethan is a striking looking fellow, and he's got a kind of Renaissance look to him. I think he's got when he tells that story about becoming a new man in the graveyard. I can see it. He's got that romantic look to him. Very, very stylish individual. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
And Ethan, had you been to an AA meeting prior to being in the graveyard? How did that kind of come about, where you decided to turn up at a meeting? And
so,
presumably you knew about it because of your mum and things like that.
Yeah, but also because of the friend that I said took his own life. He was also an addict. Through large periods of my I used a lot of ketamine, for example. So it's funny, my drug use was always really disassociate. So I would use like prescription drugs, heroin, ketamine, psychedelics, because I always wanted to be out of me, not more in me. And with the ADHD, if I was cocaine, crack, all of that, it just made me feel a bit normal. I just wanted to tidy my flat mostly, or organise my paperwork, which I just never did. So I didn't really enjoy that. I wanted to escape me. And he had struggled. And when he was about 25, I think, his mum paid for him to go to a rehab, and that rehab was a 12-step rehab. So when he come out, I was like, oh, I'll support you, we'll go. And we went to a few meetings then. So the first time I actually went to meetings, I was about 25. I knew my mum had done them, but I didn't really have any sort of concept of what they really were. She had sort of said it in passing, but I didn't really know what it involved, whatever. Obviously at 25, again, you're still full of the arrogance of youth. Mm-hmm. I was in desperate need of help. I'd sit in there and I'd think, these people ain't like me. They ain't like me. They're all well. They're happy. They're laughing. They're talking about, feeling fulfilled in their life. And we didn't keep it up. He didn't want to go. I was like, we don't need to be there. We're not like them. We were absolutely in the gutter. We did need to be there. We did need to be there. But the pride and the ego and this facade and the walls that I'd built up, I couldn't be vulnerable in a room at 25. I was just holding the pieces together. And I'd been going for so before I was in the graveyard, I'd been going for about 3 weeks. When I'd got to my nan's place, I'd said I was going to try and change and all that, and it just wasn't working. I'd been smoking crack with my father in that time, and I just thought maybe I'm not going to get it. I'm not going to get it. It's not going to work. And like I said, I did the praying that they kept suggesting, and I thought it was a joke. I was like, what, pray to what? There was a God. He wouldn't have let me have the life I've had. Something about it worked. Something about other people telling their story, and I heard a few stories, and it was like, it made my story look nice, like a picnic. And I thought, well, like, there's no excuse. People talking about losing their children and staying sober. And I couldn't get my head around that. I thought, what's my excuse? Because mummy didn't love me, because I didn't feel safe. And this person's talking about burying their children. And he's saying, I'm not going to use. And it was profound for me. And not one person there was paid to be there. They were all there by choice, but it was really tough to start with. They were like, we love you. I'm like, what do you mean you love me? You don't know me. Give us a hug. So I couldn't bear to be touched. I hated who I was. I hated life. I hated the world. And there they were and I said in the Love in Motion, loved me back to life. And that's really what happened there. They loved me until I could love me. And now I get the privilege of doing it with others. It's a real amazing thing, but it was tough. It was tough, and it requires. Go on, sorry, Tim.
Sorry, no, I didn't mean to. I was going to say about the Love in Motion and how. Yeah. Actually, you heard Rich. You talked about the 12-step program and at the event, I think, didn't you? And I wondered, Rich, if you had some reflections on it from your perspective. But also, was it this process and the 12-step program and also the spiritual epiphany that you had that led you to these more deeper thinking about your life and your behaviour, etc.?
Yeah, definitely. Rich, did you want to put in?
Yeah, only I suppose because my dad was in and out of rehab during my adolescence. My brother went to rehab. Then both of them went to AA, and then a few years ago my brother came and detoxed at our house before going to rehab and is now part of AA. And so at different points I've kind of I was very lucky in the sense of like I used drugs and alcohol problematically during my adolescence, but I had enough positive experiences that I ended up becoming a social worker. And essentially, that became my addiction, and I just was a workaholic during my 20s.
Got to be saying, can it?
It's got to be something. And so I used to go to AA meetings kind of intermittently, and although I couldn't say I'm like an alcoholic. Everything that they would say when they would share and talk about their experiences, I could relate to because the addiction, as you pointed out, Ethan, is like the surface manifestation of the underlying feelings of worthlessness or inadequacy or fear or not being loved. And that's fundamentally what they were speaking to. And that was where I found resonance. And even for me, not being like technically an alcoholic, I felt more comfortable in those meetings than I did in any other context in my environment. And that was even, I was a professional, I was doing fairly okay, I had a good home life, and I still felt like a sense of belonging and a sense of love that is very hard to find almost anywhere else. And that idea of higher power about, I think when I went to one of the meetings, somebody explained it as just, you have to interpret it in your own way, I think, because it isn't like a strictly religious definition. But what one of the guys just talked about it being like a manifestation of love for yourself and love for others and love for humanity in general. And so that probably resonated with me. But what I find amazing really is how, so Alcoholics Anonymous is probably the most effective peer support group that's ever been established, probably in the world. And yet there's so many parents that I work with and social workers who are completely unaware of what AA does and how it contributes and can support people through recovery. And I think it's probably one of the biggest underused resources that we have available.
I get the feeling that it's deliberately not over-explained.
Yeah.
So that you come in and I'm speaking from ignorance because I haven't been to a meeting, but I always like that feel of it, that it's rather than something that's over-packaged and becomes unfashionable. We spoke about language right at the start, didn't we, Ethan? It's like language and comes in and out of fashion. Trauma-informed is de rigueur at the moment, but AA has got a consistent, it's more about the people and the method rather than the package and the language. Yeah.
Well, it's by design that it's attraction rather than promotion. And obviously it's independent and stays free. So there's like a whole list of traditions. So you do the 12 steps for the individual and you do the 12 traditions for the group. And part of it is that it's independent. It's not going to be connected or facilitating anyone else's beliefs or structures, takes no outside funding. But it is arguably, if you come up with the 12 steps as they work now, if you come up that as a training program, as a recovery program for people now, that would be £100 million idea, and you would be rich forever. And it is free. It's given away free. And the God stuff, when I arrived there, I was like, oh, what do you mean, God? Like, what's this all about? And I was told it can stand for good orderly direction or group of drunks. And you were right. It's very much, but I need that. I need that because the concept of having a God or a higher power or there being some spiritual element to life was absolutely absent from me. Because I thought, if there's a God, why is there so much pain and suffering? But what's the other alternative? That life is meaningless and it's pointless. Then I can't believe that either. So there was something, and it's this thing, you cannot have the knowledge of faith without first the belief. And it isn't a religious program. I'm one of the only Christians that are in the local area. I think probably if you did it by percentage of actual religious people in the groups here, because there's multiple fellowships, I go to a couple of them. I could only name about 2 or 3 that are actually Christian. All the rest have a higher power of spirituality. It's meditation, it's prayer. It's just turning outwards of yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, no, sorry, Ethan.
No, go.
Yeah,
it's
no,
good.
I just think there's something about like having something outside of yourself to look up to and have as a source of inspiration and motivation. Because when you have a sense of self that's so orientated towards selfishness or egotistical desires or addiction, then you don't want to be left with that alone because it just orientates you to completely in the wrong direction. And so if you can have a belief in something other than yourself, when the self has been so problematic and dysfunctional, it can help orientate you in a more positive direction, I think.
I completely agree. And I was told service and helping other people is how you stay well. Because when you're helping other people, you're not thinking about you. When you're saying, what can I do for the world instead of what can the world do for me, it radically changes your perspective. Now, I can love you, Rich, in a way I can't love me, but it's esteemable actions. If I'm loving and caring for you, I don't feel like a piece of shit. How can I be a piece of shit when I'm supporting you the best I can? And when I fall, you pick me up. But when you fall, Tim picks you up. When Tim falls, someone else picks him up, and it's a circle of love and support that's just free. I couldn't wrap my head around it. But it's almost anti-society, isn't it?
Well, when you're, I don't know, do you know the Camarados? And there's this thing called Camarados, this guy, Math Potts. I'm not about promoting other things, but it just really resonates at this point because the Camarados is like more than a stranger, but less than a friend. So it's like a fellow person, citizen, yeah, that's like will be prepared to be alongside you. But he says when someone needs help, like really needs help, ask them to help you. And actually that's more powerful, to ask them to help you rather than diving in with your form of help or trying to anticipate what you think would work. And that self-esteem we're talking about. Yeah. I'm thinking about, do you know what? And we must say that we first met Ethan when he came along to the Love in Motion event that he mentioned a few moments ago. And it was like maybe 2 Fridays ago now, wasn't it? And we were so pleased to see him there. And he uttered that phrase, which is now echoes in my brain box, which is being loved back to life. And since we spoke to him then, he's been also dropping other lyrics regularly that have sort of maybe like sort of engaging my neurospicy proclivities, you know, and I think that's part of it, isn't it? If whatever professional lived experience working across the lines to try and, you know, do stuff together, it's like I think that floats your boat and how you are as a person and your neurodiversity that does is a factor. I wanted to make an editorial decision here because I got to say to you that Ethan's doing some really, really interesting work on trauma-informed training and working and facilitating with professionals. I think we want to give some due time to that. So I think, Rich, we can edit this bit if needed. I think we should do a part 2, do you think? With that, if we can do that in the next few weeks and give the listener a part 2, because I think if we tag that on the end, it's quite a substantial piece of work, and with the insights that you've got, Ethan, it would be really nice for us to talk about that together. And I got the book down off the shelf, the Trauma Industrial Complex, because I thought we could perhaps have an episode where we get into that trauma informed world that we're in and training that we're in different ways as professionals and people lived experience at the moment. Does that sound like a plan, Rich? Are you cool?
Yeah, I think that's a really good idea. To do a part 2.
Yeah.
Maybe next Thursday when we've got it lined up.
Yeah. We've got a slot. Next week.
An 8 a.m. slot, is it, boys?
Let's do
it. So kind of you.
You know, we had our first 2-parter recently, but that was like an actual planned thing. We've never actually got to the end. If I said it was going to be 45 minutes, we've got to an hour, and it's like, but I'm sure we could easily, without breaking sweat, have a 3 or 4-parter. But so should we neatly tie that off and say, Ethan, that was so interesting. We're going to come back and talk about. We've heard the story. We've heard that transition from that deep unawareness and uncomfortableness that you describe into the insights and the recovery journey and the 12-step program. And next time we speak, we're going to put the trauma-informed concept on the table and give it a real going over and talk about it, talk about the work that you're doing and the work that we're doing, and see if we can bring some heat and light to that conversation. But it's really good. Thanks so much for joining at 8 a.m. and I'm glad you had a big enough mug to fit all that coffee in.
I'm going to go and have a nap now, I think.
All right.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a real pleasure, and obviously thanks, Rich, for sharing some of your story as well. It's nice to have that connection and understanding. It's that thing, isn't it? Hand in hand is how we change outcomes of looked after children, not pointing fingers from other opposite trenches, like we said earlier. You know, this stuff and people like you that are back in lived experience and care experience and lifting us up, not only for a platform and trauma tourism, but also development. and the growth and the push on and being respected as professionals that maybe don't have degrees but do have stuff to give. And it's a real pleasure. So I appreciate both of you and for inviting me on.
We appreciate you too. And it's when you talk about gravity, it's an equal weight, I think, that we're bringing to this space. And I hope that I appreciate you saying that there's we're anchoring you, but you're anchoring us most definitely. Yeah.
You're in trouble if I'm anchoring you.
I've totally mixed the metaphor.
Yeah.
We did so well right to the end, and then the swearing started. So with that, I'm going to stop the recording.
Okay.
Right. Morning, Ethan.
Morning.
Good to see you again.
Yeah, back again.
So we're back again. Yeah, back for a part 2, and we made a live editorial decision. Those of you that listened to the last episode, and you must go back and listen to that. Because it's fascinating. I know lots of people have been sending us feedback and talking about it and said that they'd given it a good listen. And but we made a live editorial decision at the end of the last one that we wanted to come back and really talk about your work as well, Ethan. If part 1 was really about your life, I guess, wasn't it?
Yeah.
But but we really wanted to talk about the interesting work as well that you're doing. And perhaps we could start with our point of connection. We flagged that a little bit last time, that we wanted that where we met. And it was a couple of Fridays ago, wasn't it, at the Love in Motion event?
Yeah.
And how did you find yourself coming along to that?
Yeah, well, when you say met, very briefly at the end, you was busy that day. It was quite hectic, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So how I ended up there was a mutual contact of ours came to one of the trainings I do in West Sussex with Chrissy for the newly qualified social workers, and she stayed to listen to some of my experience, and she just said, because I talk a lot about love and hope and resilience in the talks that I do, and she just said it really made her think of you and the event you're doing, and she just emailed and said, would I like to come? And big events and stuff like that aren't normally me, but I know I have to do them. And I'm really glad I did. I did think about turning around a couple of times on the way into London, early morning. I'm like, it's so busy, hectic, really beautiful event. And that's how I ended up there. And I wasn't really sure what to expect.
Yeah, well, I'm really glad that you kept going. And it is a lot of risk, isn't it? I think they say relational risk sometimes to go to something you haven't been to before. I think we all have that experience in one way or another. So to come, we did actually, I saw something the other day. I mentioned to you, Rich, that I saw something online. I think it was K.A. McKercher, who does a lot of work in participation and co-design and stuff like that, Ethan. And she was talking about, access requirements. And that sounds quite sort of cold and literal, doesn't it? But what is it that gives you the confidence to go along to something new? I think the main access requirement is probably somebody like Bridget that can be that point of connection, isn't it?
Yeah.
And, brilliant. I love Bridget, and she's
lovely.
come to,
but
I think she's come to the full set of events, over the years. And
we didn't know each other, but she's, just was like, it's definitely something that you should come to. You'll really enjoy it. And I think, some of what's the confidence to go there. I'm very much a believer that what is in life is meant to be. If I wasn't meant to be there, I wouldn't have been offered to go there. It's like that, isn't it? You come to these doors in life. Do you push through it, even when you're not sure, and say, all right, and follow that path? Or do you, stay comfortable and not explore it? Everything that comes to you comes for a reason. And that's why I went. That's why I chose to go.
Yeah. Well, for those of you that have not been to those events before, it's an event that we started on Valentine's Day, or as near as possible, and we hold them once a year, and they're about love, participation, and bringing together social workers, other professionals, and also people with different types of lived experience to talk about the universal things, the common themes. So rather than coming and hearing a set of presentations or to talk about, the methods that we use in our work, which is a common thing for us to have events that are more that style, isn't it? Or an event that has an explicit structure or hierarchy. You hear from the director, you hear from the, and it's a set agenda and a keynote situation. It's more trying to bring people together to talk about common ideas and themes and to try to set the context, warm the context for that as much as possible. And so we had some activities on the day, didn't we? I've got there's a Polaroid of you somewhere chatting. So we had a few activities, didn't we? We had the mingle one at the start where we're playing music and everybody's moving around. Yeah.
And that worked really well. Got us talking, and I didn't know who anyone was. And I had some really fascinating conversations. And I probably wouldn't have gone across the room to talk to people. And I think that's really why it worked. I've been to, like events and stuff, and it is very like they're more focused on, the speaker, the buffet, the ambience. And actually what was the focus at Love in Motion, which I really liked, was the people. And it was the people and, the blend of people and actually how together it felt. I was told it was lo-fi or something at the beginning, but that worked better because actually the centre point was the people, was the work, was the passion, was the experience. And it didn't feel like the social workers are over there, the doctors are over there, the psychologists are over there, lived experience. No, we were one thing, one people. It was very much the physical representation of Love in Motion, wasn't it?
Yeah. And it's an opportunity, and you definitely piped up and made a contribution, which was very striking on the day, and that was great. And I mentioned the Polaroids we had. That was a twist this time because it's an old friend of one of the Love in Motion regular contributors, Azra Zifu, and her, he's a lecturer in Goldsmiths, and he came along with his little team and did a photography session using Polaroids. And so it was like, as well as connecting, people were seeing each other by taking a Polaroid image of each other. And then we made an instant gallery up on the wall, which was really nice. So I enjoyed that as an extra flavour. And the other thing which I think helped us connect, participate, warm the context, was we had the spoken word poetry there, and that was Frances Gillard, and whose mother is a social worker and who was there as well. And I thought she was really good. And you have a bit of something different, a bit of spoken word, something that connects with the feelings in a different way before you have those sort of discussions in a circle. And I think that helps the dialogue. And we found that over the years. Yeah.
It was really amazing. And her mum looked so proud of her. She looked so proud. I mean, fair play. It was amazing. It was amazing. And asking the questions afterwards and allowing people to come forward and speak and stuff. And even that takes like a step in faith, doesn't it? To speak in front of a room full of amazing people that are doing amazing work. And then it just connects you. Someone shares something and then someone's share grows off of it. Almost like grows from what each person says.
Tim, I'm interested in, so how long have you done these events for, and what was your original thinking behind them?
Yeah, this was, the first one we did was 2019. They have been going a little while. The first one was actually on Valentine's Day, I think it was 2020, and that actually fell on the day, Valentine's Day. Originally, we were in Camden Council. One of the reasons Ethan I was saying about lo-fi is that the event is a bit different because we self-fund it in Relational Activism now, and it's always free and there's always food. That's a prerequisite. But in the Camden Council days, when I worked for Camden Council, we used to sort of clear the decks on the 11th floor and and they used to fund it, and it was kind of a bit of a different thing then. And it was more like disrupting that space. So we used to talk about hopeful disruption, and you'd get the heart-shaped confetti, stuck in the corners of the room for weeks after, and the buildings facility managers complaining that we're playing music in the office while people were trying to work. So that was kind of interesting. But now we sort of nod to that with the Love in Motion title now, where now we're out and about, and that was in a community venue, and it feels freeing in lots of ways to be doing it under our own steam, and it's just really nice. My main aim and the level that I'm looking for the event is just to make it good enough that people will be interested in coming again the next year, and I think we achieved that.
Definitely achieved that.
That bar. Yeah.
If anyone gets
yeah.
an opportunity to go, I highly recommend going. It's one of the better things I've been to, and I really enjoyed it.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you get to meet Ethan next year as well. I hope you're going to be a fixture into the future.
I'm not going to be doing no spoken word poetry, expressional dance.
You got to get. Oh,
surprise on the day. Could you do your care experience through dance, Ethan? Which I can't.
You're onto something there. We've never done it. Expressive dance.
I feel like Rich might be the man for
that could be. That's yeah. What do you reckon, Rich?
I might not be available next year. Thinking about it.
You just checked your diary.
I'm busy all of February 2027. Yeah.
Bust a few dance moves. Yeah. But you've come to lots of them, Rich, haven't you, over the years, and in recent times been part of the organising of them. Yeah.
I think when I came to one a few years ago, because I think at the moment there is much more representation in terms of like lived experience voices within children's social care. But it wasn't that long ago when it was very unusual that you would hear from a parent or an adult who'd been through the care system, or anyone really with any of that type of experience. It was very professionally led and professionally focused, wasn't it? And I think you were probably pioneer in leading that kind of encouragement of bringing lived and learned experience together. I think I'd been a social worker for over 10 years, and I'd never been to an event anything like the one that I went to in the Camden offices when I first went to it. It kind of blew my mind, really, that you had the professionals and lots of people with different forms of lived experience. And there was no, like Ethan was saying, really, people were speaking and you wouldn't even know where the context that they were speaking from. So you didn't know whether you were listening to a professional or whether you were listening to someone with lived experience, because everybody's voice was given kind of equal opportunity to talk and to share. And I think that was I think it's probably more common now, but back then it was very unusual. Really opened my mind, to the richness of the learning that's available when you bring people together like that.
Yeah. And we do need there's a lot of talk, isn't there, about a sort of whole system response. Also, whole family is quite a phrase at the moment. I think that's, so, and we might do events that focus on different types of lived experience, but we need actually the whole, everybody to be together if we're going to change the whole thing, isn't it? Yeah. Well, if you are interested in it, there are some little films from the event on the Relational Activism YouTube channel and on our website as well, if you search it up. But on this topic, Ethan, because that was the first time you come to that event, but it wasn't your first rodeo as far as, as you said, being at in that kind of setting where you're really getting to grips with the feelings and actually trying to influence professionals as well. And you've been doing some really interesting work recently, and I wondered if you could tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, I think just off the back of what Rich said, I think it's really important to have people that are professionals that back lived experience, that give us a platform, give us a voice, encourage us, but not as like a novelty or tokenistic, actually bring us on board and take us seriously, because that's, some of it. I think previously it was, bring them out, get them to tell their story, but actually we're not going to listen to them because we know better. And I think the system stays stuck, and I always try and not run down social work or, any system that people work in, because there's amazing people that work in really difficult systems, but something about it doesn't work. Something about it doesn't work because it's generations of families with having kids removed and stuff. So even the idea of me being able to come and talk to social workers and teach them, you know, would have been like laughable 10 years ago, you know, and still some members of my, you know, my birth family don't really understand it. They don't really understand it. It's very much like, why are you doing that? Why are you working with them? Why are you? And it's like, but we're not on opposing teams. It's like, you know, why do I do it? Because I hope to improve the outcome of children who are looked after. It's like, you know, why did each of you become a social worker? Rich, why did you become a social worker?
Because of my dad grew up in care, and he became a social worker because he went to multiple different care homes, was sexually abused in one of them, and then he abused drugs and alcohol pretty much all of his adult life, and then he got clean when he was in his like mid-30s, became a social worker, did that for a few years, then relapsed this was during my adolescence, and then died when I was 16. And then when I asked my mum, why was my dad a social worker, she said, he wanted to stop what happened to him happening to others. And then because I felt sad that he wasn't able to complete that because he basically relapsed back into drugs and alcohol, so he only did it for like 3 or 4 years. I felt like I'd try and finish it off for him. So that was how I ended up into the work.
And look how powerful that is, you know. Look how powerful that is, you know. And it's like my family and your family are not opposed. We both want the same thing, and that's for children not to experience that suffering. You know. What about you, Tim? Why did you become a social worker?
I think for me, it's more like an instinct of that. I mean, I left school, actually. I was dyslexic. I didn't have any qualifications when I left school. And so I was an estate agent.
I could see you as an estate agent.
Yeah, I know. I've still got all the suits in the cupboard, you know. So occasionally I bring them out.
Is that the power suit?
That's it. Yeah, that's the power dressing. Yeah, I bring that one out.
Closing the deal.
And yeah. And I think, some of those skills of being like sales, I guess, when you're trying to get things over the line, like a bit more funding for your family good conferencing or your lived experience advocacy, I think it has been helpful over the years to have a bit of a sales pattern, you know, and a bit of experience in that. I mean, we've talked about it, and you like about your charisma and ability to powers of persuasion, and I think all of those things are part of relational working, actually. And, you know, showing that passion and being able to back it up with a good argument. I might be slightly diverting from the question, but we've got a little exercise called elevator pitch. And it's when you're talking and you're speaking to people that might be offering family good conferencing to people or lived experience advocacy, and you're working with the professionals, the social workers that kind of gatekeep those services sometimes because they're the ones that offer it. So you might be the passionate one that set the service up, or the person that's going to be the advocate or the community organizer, but you rely on that first conversation and that offer of that service from the social worker that's like allocated to the family. So they need to be confident. They need to give them a bit of the passion and the sales pitch. And so we do this like elevator pitch exercise in some of our training, which is a bit salesy, but yeah. And then one day I was working this estate agents, and one day I went to first of all, I was just making the tea and doing the photocopying. And then one day, I got to start measuring up the houses, and I went to measure somebody's house. And they were an academic, actually, and just spent the whole afternoon chatting with them. And they were like, "What are you doing with your life? You know, you should try and go back to school and do something with it." Yeah. So I went on this like access course thing at college, then went to uni, did politics, and then but like the sort of Westminster politics didn't do it for me. I was like, it didn't seem to be a route to change, and I didn't know what social work was. And I learned about social work, and then I thought, oh, that sounds good. But I think I was a bit one of those like sandal wearing sort of hippie social workers that wanted to
stereotype
change the world and change had quite a political sense because I'd come in off this politics degree. And then so I found a channel for that through these methods like family conference and advocacy, which are more about community. And so, yeah, I think that's it for me. Like an instinct that I want community to be involved. It's like a political thing for me. Yeah.
And the reason I asked, and it's sort of I flipped the script there and asked you both questions.
You see
that? I just like flip the script and change it. But the reason I asked was it's relevant because two human stories. You know, my story is just a human story as well, and yet I was conditioned to believe social workers were bad or evil or in it for the wrong reason, or, you know, they can't be trusted, or they're here to like take you away, or, you know, that whole stereotype that was funneled into me as a child. Both of you have just proven that it's a lie. You know, that actually you're just two human beings with your life story and your own decisions to lead you there. And I think that's why it's worked. We're realizing we're just humans. And my thing is like, I just want to create hope. It's a very demanding and stressful environment that you guys work in. And I didn't see that as a child, you know, your caseloads. So when I do the trauma informed stuff, it's, you know, I always focus on encouragement that actually you are making a difference, even if you don't see it. You know, a lot of the people that made a difference in my life don't know that they've done that. I don't even know if they're alive, some of them, but they made an impact. I've never been able to thank them for it. They'll never know, but yet they've still made the impact. And that's always what I try and shape it around with my lived experience talks and stuff.
Yeah, yeah. And what's it like, Ethan, in those when you're at that training and you're giving those talks? What's the sort of setup and what's your experience of it?
So for about the last 18 months, I've been working with Chrissy Bullins. If anyone doesn't know her, they should look her up. She's a big champion of lived experience, but not tokenistic. Getting lived experience and actually pushing them on professionally. So I've been working with her for about 18 months.
Nice one, Chrissy. Yeah, shout out to Chrissy.
Yeah, shout out. She's the stereotype social worker as well. The first time I met her, I picked her out of the crowd straight away. I knew who she was and I'd never seen her before. It was the DMs, the dungarees and the backpack. So, yeah.
Okay.
That was the first thing they said.
See, if you're listening, these are the features out there. If you're listening to this,
yeah. So you still laugh about that.
And you have some DMs.
I said I knew who you was before I saw you. You know, like so. But she's just been a big advocate of mine and a bit of a mentor in the sense. So she has been doing trauma informed for like 11 years and had built a course. And has lived experience people and. I did a podcast for Community Care Informed about 4 years ago, something like that, and she had seen that, and we got linked up through that. So originally, I was just going to come on and talk my lived experience for an hour, but you know, I started attending the courses because of my own learning and growth, and I wanted to see what happened, and it's just matured into this thing where I now do a bit of teaching as well as my lived experience, and rather than it just be, you know, when I first started doing this, it was very much my story. But now it's very much, how does my story fit into the teaching? So it's like, I've professionally grown, the stories are the same, but where it folds in has completely changed. It's just going really well and I love doing it and it's really engaging. Sometimes it's tough for people to hear stuff, you know, and that's part of it, isn't it? And I think it brings the learning to life. It makes it human. We all know what it's like being on training courses. Sometimes they can be really dry. I've been on some training courses. The information is amazing, but they can be a bit dry. Having the human go, okay, so this is what we're saying is the theory, and here it is in real life. And the blend between the two is what brings it together. And we love working together, and it's going really well. And everyone seems to get a lot from it.
I love that element, Ethan. That's really interesting. I love that element about how you originally it was one thing, very valuable as that is, you coming and talking, and you saw that opportunity. And so the format of it and the style of your input has changed. And I think maybe looping back to the discussion about the event, I think having professionals have like the lived experience shaping the format and the way that we can engage and learn, I think that's really important, and not just squeezing in lived experience into our existing formats and templates for how we learn. When you've got that mix in the room, actually try to set up the learning experience differently and letting people live the experience lead. I mean, we had that with with Clarissa Stevens, at the events, and she was there leading the mingle as usual this year, and that was her. She always says she magpied it from somebody else, but as far as I'm concerned, that's always her innovation, that mingle, and having her lead it. Yeah.
Ethan, I was interested in one of the books that we looked at last year was by Darren McGarvey, and one of the concerns or potential pitfalls that he raised about using lived experience was the kind of sense of pressure that people might experience to conform to like a familiar structure where there's this like moment of revelation, where there's this kind of transformative point where despite all of the adversity, you finally emerge from the kind of belly of the beast, so to speak. It's a kind of classic hero's journey, which is, it's neat, it's inspiring, and it's kind of comfortable. There's a kind of like, here's my life before, here's this moment of revelation. Now here I am presenting to you, all fixed and resolved and reborn. And what he was saying is actually, there may be some truth to that, but actually for a lot of people, it's not as neat and tidy as that. And a lot of people, even when they overcome some of the most significant difficulties, life is still very difficult and challenging, and there's lots of psychological and relational pitfalls that they are subject to. And I just wondered what your thoughts were on that.
Yeah, I think most people don't have that arc. That's the truth of it, isn't it? Most kids that I was in care with are not in good places. The ones I know about, lots of them have not gone on to have any sort of stability in their life. So it's few and far between, I think. And it's very much like the wounds of my past are healed, but I'm covered in scars, and I still see them. They're not gone. I'm still covered in scars, and I can look down and see them sometimes, and they can come up, and they can come up for the smallest of reasons. I think it's, like if there's no opportunity for lived experience, and I understand, that side of it, that actually, is it good to keep bringing up your story? Is it healthy? Is it sort of like we said about trauma tourism? But actually, by having lived experience and by being prepared to speak about my lived experience, doors are opening for me that wouldn't open otherwise. As I shared last week, I'm neurodiverse and I've got dyslexia as well. The idea of me going and doing a degree, possibly I wouldn't cope with that. So my lived experience and being able to share it from a place of, some degree of healing has opened doors to me and has given me opportunities that I wouldn't have otherwise. So yes, there is dangers around the lived experience and how that's used, but there's also really big benefits for me that actually probably I wouldn't get without it. And as long as the people that are handling the lived experience when they're sort of fledgling are doing it in a healthy way and they're doing it in a loving way and a progressive way, I think it can be a really empowering thing. My trauma isn't now the weights that hold me down. It's the wings that I'm flying on. Do you know what I mean? It's changed two different things. Everyone's got trauma. Everyone's got lived experience. No one can escape trauma. Like, it's part of life. It's part of life. One thing we're going to guarantee is people we love are going to die. That's an absolute. And there's trauma there. So everyone's going to experience it. But it's what do I do with my trauma? And actually, my trauma has become my strength. My trauma, helps me fund my daughter's security. And that's a gift for me. And I wouldn't want it to be that, having lived experience becomes a thing that people are a bit scared of, or, we shouldn't really do it, or we re-traumatizing people, because actually it's been a real great opportunity for me. And it can turn my crazy, painful life into something that, I think I said last week, like, my pain becomes someone's shelter. My pain becomes someone's learning. My survival, that arc you're talking about, that hero's arc, is the inspiration that fires maybe rundown social workers, rundown foster carers, rundown, family workers that are thinking, I'm not making a difference. And then they come on a course and they're hearing lived experience saying, you are making a difference. The love you give me today is making a difference. So it's like, where's the line between giving opportunities and obviously not exploiting. And it's, as long as the person, we've got some good champions in social work, and I've come across some good people. Like I said, I've got a lovely mentor that's, adamant that lived experience isn't a show, it's a skill. I might not have a degree, but I've lived a whole life of this, and I've got something to give. So it's, I can understand, and it's determining whether the person's well enough or is skilled enough to do it. I think, there are people that I know in my private life that have lots of lived experience. Would I invite them on to come and do a talk, or would I encourage them to do stuff? Probably not, because I would say that it wouldn't necessarily be a good thing for them. I'm quite comfortable and settled in who I am as a man and the experiences I've had. It doesn't overly negatively affect me. If anything, it inspires and encourages me. So it's like, where's the line there? And I don't know.
Yeah, and that's interesting. And who makes that call, and how is that call made, and about whether somebody is ready or whether it would be beneficial for them or not. And I think that, in some ways, professionals have got to make some of those decisions, be sensitive to those issues themselves, of course, but also I think it's really good to learn and try to get help and orientate us more in this topic, so that those decisions can be made in a way that's sensitive, and it could be done in a progressive way, as you say. Ethan said a phrase last time. Do you remember? It was trauma. I was playing a word game now. Trauma tourism, wasn't it? Yeah. And what did you? I was struck by that.
Yeah. So that's
those words you use. Yeah.
Yeah, something that me and Chrissy have spoken about a lot. And why do you get lived experience in? So I sometimes am specific about my traumas, and I can be, depending on the context. It can evolve during the day on the training and stuff, or on the talk, or the people I've met. I can be specific about the individual events, but often it's more a broad stroke. I do like a broad stroke, rather than the details, because it's like that. Do we want to hear the details, and then it becomes a bit, like shock and awe, and, it can become that sort of thing. You want to hear the gritty details, or is it, okay, so like, when we're talking about the ACEs, am I going over it in a broad stroke? Am I talking about sexual abuse in detail, or in general? This is how it made me feel. This is the experience. This is what I went on to afterwards. This is how I felt in my next relationship, or, this is how it's affecting my behavior, rather than the actual experience in detail. And I think there's a big difference between the two things. If you're wanting all the gruesome details, you're probably wanting it for the wrong reason. Sometimes it's relevant. Sometimes that's important because it can hammer home a teaching point, or it can bring emotion up. And emotion is always an anchor for learning, I think. But it's how it's delivered.
And Ethan, have you that distinction that you're able to make at the moment between deciding whether you're going to offer broad strokes, or whether you're on occasion willing to share something more intimate and specific? Is that something that you've always had a kind of an awareness of, or is that something that you've developed?
I think it's developed over time. It's definitely developed over time. I think, I suppose originally all I had was my story. So it would just be my story, and where I evolved professionally, I see where it's important to share details and where it's not important. And I think that just develops in time. It wouldn't be like a trauma dump. I wouldn't just dump everything out, but it's definitely, you refine from what works and what doesn't work. Also, it's, it could be one person in your training or a talk or a conference, at Love in Motion. One person might have talked to me about a certain experience of themselves, and I might feel the need to come onto their level and to be together in that experience. It's just finding where and when.
Yeah, because I think in the book I wrote, I spoke a lot about my childhood, and a few people have said, that's quite brave or courageous of you to share so much of your life experiences. But in some ways they don't see what I leave out strategically in the sharing of that story. Much of what I write about is I have to provide some context, like my dad used drugs and alcohol, my mum suffered with depression. but I don't talk about what my actual experiences were in terms of the things that I seen and heard and went through. I'm very much focused on how living with those parents affected who I am and how I had to learn to adapt to that growing up. So it's much more focused on my subjective experience and how it made me feel and how I had to develop certain coping strategies. But I think to the untrained eye, maybe, or to somebody who's got lived experience and is wanting to share what they've been through, it's hard to kind of see that distinction, I think.
I think that's the healthy way forward, though. Saying about the trauma
we noticed that when
complex. Sorry, Tim, go on.
No, I was. Yeah, I was going to say, thanks, Ethan, that we did reflect last time, and listening back to the podcast and that conversation that we had with you last week, that it was the arc of your story rather than diving into those specific intimate moments. And yes, we were alive to that, as Rich says. Yeah.
And I think that's the healthy way forward, isn't it? I think that path that Rich has just said, that actually you have to say it because that's the lived experience, but it's how it's used. And I think if you're walking that path where, okay, there is lived experience, but we're not reeling it out to be shocked or a shock factor or to, like enjoy it in some way, because naturally we do enjoy, why do we all watch the documentaries we do? Everyone's obsessed with crime and serial killers. Why is that? Because it's shocking and it's exciting. But actually, in a professional sense, like finding that balance between the two and learning from that, I think is crucial. And it's how lived experience and professional become one thing rather than two separate things. I think with that context, it merges into like one road rather than be Ethan's over here telling about this shocking thing and we're over here telling you about how we professionally deal with that. No, we need to move together, and together the change comes. Together, the outcome for children is better. But there's a time and a place for shock and horror. Sometimes people need a shock and horror to actually like bring them into the moment, and that's what you need. Like this is the experience, and this is how I felt, and this was the darkness I crawled out of. And sometimes that can be really effective. But if someone's not got the skill set or the learning, or like Rich was saying right in his book, if you have not got the right skill set of when to do it and when not to do it, it can become a re-traumatization. It can almost be a prostitution of their trauma and their pain. And then that's not healthy for anyone, is it?
No, that's right. And there is a pornographic element, isn't there, to a lurid, as you say, a shock and awe, I think. Yeah. Well, Rich, having you being kind enough, Ethan, to come and talk about your story and the arc of your story, but then also to, in this part too, be able to break down how lived experience can be utilized to the benefit both of the person that's been through those things, but also for professionals, I find really, really instructive and useful. I'm really grateful to you for joining us on Messy Social Work. And this was part two. I have a feeling that this won't be the final chapter. Yeah, it'd be really nice to have you come back again. Really, thanks so much for coming on and talking to us, Ethan, and to be continued.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.